You know, the phone in your hand or the laptop on your desk, it's the end result of a journey that's literally thousands of years old. And today, we're going to trace that incredible story from, believe it or not, our own fingers, all the way to the birth of artificial minds. So let's dive in.
So, take a look at this. How on earth did we get from that, a machine that filled an entire room, to the sleek, powerful laptops we have today? That's the big question, right? And that's exactly the story we're going to unpack.
Okay, to really get a grip on the modern computer, we have to rewind. I mean way, way back. Because long before we had electricity, the basic human need to compute was already changing everything.
For thousands of years, the most powerful calculator anyone had was literally right at their fingertips. I mean, we used our fingers, our toes, maybe some stones on the ground to count stuff. But you can see the problem, can't you? What happens when you need to count past 10? Humanity needed a serious upgrade. And that upgrade, it came in the form of the abacus. This thing, invented over 5,000 years ago, was the world's first real calculating machine. And it was an absolute game changer.
And the design is just so clever, so simple. It's just a frame with beads on rods, right? But a skilled user could whip through complex calculations faster than you can imagine. For the very first time, we could manage big numbers reliably. This thing basically powered commerce and trade for centuries.
All right, so the abacus pretty much nailed calculation. But the next huge leap, that was a totally different kind of dream. It wasn't just about a machine that could calculate. It was about a machine that could be programmed. A machine that could, in a way, think for itself.
And the guy who first had that dream, a full century before the technology even existed, was an English mathematician named Charles Babbage. Today we know him as the father of the computer, and for very good reason.
Now, Babbage had first designed something called a difference engine for specific kinds of math. But his real masterpiece, his big idea, was the analytical engine. See, this wasn't just another calculator. This was a blueprint for a machine that could be programmed with instructions to solve any kind of problem. It was the conceptual blueprint for every single computer that followed.
And here's the part that just blows my mind. Babbage's vision, all the way back in 1833, laid out the 4 key steps that still define all computing. You've got input for the data, a processor he called the mill, a memory unit he called the store, and an output for the results. That exact 4-step process, it's happening inside your phone right now as you're watching this. But, Babbage's ideas were just too far ahead of their time. The steam-powered gears of his day just couldn't build what his mind designed. It would take about another 100 years for technology to finally catch up. And that brings us to the dawn of the electronic age, the first generation of computers.
And when I say giants, I mean they were absolute behemoths. Just look at ENIAC, built in 1946. This monster weighed 30 tons, took up a whole room, and was used for everything from predicting the weather to calculating artillery tables. This was Generation 1 in all its massive, room-sized glory. So what made these giants tick? What made them electronic? Well, the magic ingredient was something called the vacuum tube. You needed thousands and thousands of these fragile glass tubes, and each one acted like a little on-off switch, controlling the flow of electricity. They were the beating heart of these early machines.
But they were also their biggest weakness. A huge liability, really. Vacuum tubes were delicate, they were insanely expensive, and they sucked up a ton of power. Plus, they got so hot that they were constantly burning out, which made these incredible machines powerful, but also super, super unreliable. So, all those problems with the vacuum tube, they basically kicked off the next great chapter in computing history. A relentless, obsessive quest to make everything smaller, faster, cheaper, and way more reliable. This was the start of the miniaturization revolution.
And this path forward was just this incredible series of breakthroughs, one after another. Each new invention you see here basically defined a whole new generation of computing, with the parts getting smaller and the power growing at a mind-boggling pace. The first really big leap forward came with the second generation. And it was all thanks to swapping out that hot, fragile vacuum tube for a revolutionary new invention, the transistor. The change was, well, it was huge. All of a sudden, computers got smaller, faster, they ran cooler, and for the very first time, you could actually depend on them.
Just look at the difference. On the left, the old vacuum tube. And on the right, the tiny transistor. This little guy, invented back in 1947, did the exact same job, but it was solid state.
which means no delicate glass, no burning filaments. This, right here, was the invention that truly unlocked the modern age of electronics.
But the next breakthrough was, if you can believe it, even more profound. See, instead of wiring up individual transistors one by one, engineers in the third generation figured out how to print an entire circuit, transistors, resistors, the whole shebang, onto one tiny little piece of silicon. This was the integrated circuit, better known as the microchip.
And this is where things just go exponential. Engineers just kept figuring out how to cram more and more stuff onto a single chip. First, it was dozens of components, then hundreds, then thousands, and pretty soon, millions of transistors in a space smaller than your fingernail. This whole idea is what we call large-scale integration.
This all led directly to the key innovation of the fourth generation, the microprocessor. Thanks to what they called very large-scale integration, the entire brain of the computer, what Babbage had called the mill, could now fit on a single chip. This was the breakthrough that finally made a personal computer affordable enough to have in your own home.
And that brings us pretty much up to today, to the fifth generation of computing. And this era is defined by a goal that's, well, it's a lot more ambitious than just making things smaller and faster.
So here we are in the fifth generation. We're using chips that are so unbelievably dense, it's hard to even picture. But the focus isn't just on raw calculation anymore. It's shifted to something called knowledge processing. This entire era is defined by the quest for real artificial intelligence, creating machines that can reason, learn, and maybe even make their own decisions.
When you really step back and look at the whole story, you see this amazing progression, right? We went from a simple tool for counting all the way to this quest to create intelligence itself. From the abacus to AI, it's all been driven by that same fundamental human desire to compute.
It's just an incredible story of human ingenuity, isn't it? We went from counting with stones to literally creating artificial minds. And it just leaves you wondering with this one huge question: what on earth comes next?